Hey there, everyone. This is Gregg Schutze for Ready for the Draft.com, and this is the Ready for the Draft podcast, getting you ready for the NFL Draft, breaking down the draft-eligible prospects for April's draft, which will be in Las Vegas, Nevada. This is the second episode of the postseason bowl edition. That's right, just a couple of days ago, broke down the first 17 bowl games from Friday, December 20th, all the way through Friday of December 27th. And as of this taping, we've already had the first 2 days worth of bowl games. We've already had some highlights, really a lot of teams that are getting their first bowl victory in history. Buffalo Bulls taking down Charlotte 31-9. Jarrett Patterson, as we talked about it in the last podcast, having a huge day, winning their first bowl game in history. Charlotte, their first bowl appearance in the Bahamas Bowl. Kent State getting their first bowl victory. Sean Lewis really doing a lot of really good things there with the Golden Flash, taking down Utah State. And then on Saturday's slate of games, you saw Liberty with Hugh Freeze taking down Georgia Southern in the Cure Bowl for their first bowl victory. And what can we say about Chris Peterson taking down his former team, Boise State, as Washington, the Huskies, taking them down in Las Vegas, the Las Vegas Bowl, 38-7 with the victory there. So we've got a full slate of games to get through. And Saturday, December 28th. Remember that date. If you don't already have that marked on your calendar, make sure you do that. Those are there are two other games on the slate for that day. So we can't rule out the Cotton Bowl and the Camping World Bowl, but really the college football playoff semifinals will be played on Saturday, December 28th. So when you take a look at those matchups, we're going to start there, and then we'll get into some of the other bowl games after that. But the first bowl game of the day that has college football playoff implications is the Peach Bowl. Number 1 LSU taking on number 4 Oklahoma. Now, obviously, Oklahoma already in the news about 4 of their players going to be out. 3 of them were suspended, including Ronnie Perkins, the defensive end, Ramondre Stevenson, the running back, who can help sustain some drives as a big physical back. He's also out. Trajan Bridges, a freshman receiver / defensive back, also out for the game. And then DeLauren Turner-Yell, their safety, broke his collarbone. He's also not going to play. And you want to be at full strength when you're going against LSU. Joe Burrow, 78% completion percentage, the Heisman Trophy winner in a landslide, breaking records with his Heisman victory. And you look at OU and Alex Grinch in his first year as defensive coordinator, he's done a lot of really good things with this defense. He's simplified things. He's allowed them to fly around and make plays, and the defense has definitely gotten better. They're making a lot of plays behind the line of scrimmage. They're among the tops in the country in tackles for loss. But again, this is LSU that we're talking about here, and you need to have Ronnie Perkins getting off the edge. I think if Ronnie Perkins isn't playing, you figure that Marquise Overton is going to get a lot more playing time. They may play both him and Neville Gallimore there up front. And really, I think a lot of pressure is on Neville Gallimore at this point to really win at the point of attack. And he's going to go up against Lloyd Cushenberry, a junior center who could very well enter the draft at the end of the season. But, Neville Gallimore, so quick, off the ball, 6'2", 303, explosive with his hands, quick first step. And that's really where he wins. He wins with his quickness, the first step quickness, getting early penetration, being very disruptive, not only against the run, but also collapsing the pocket from within to get after the quarterback. He's going to have a huge day along the interior of that line, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him line up at end at a 5 technique in this 34 defense, especially if Marquise Overton, he probably plays his best ball over the nose, filling in for Neville Gallimore. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Gallimore move outside because he does have some of that quickness, and maybe line up against Austin Deculus there at right tackle and see what he can do there. The right guard, Damian Lewis, who's a pro prospect, very physical at the point of attack, wants to maul you, beat you down, throw you down on the ground, very powerful. And that's one of the guys that Clyde Edwards-Helaire loves to run behind. And I think he's one of those guys that is going to be tasked with trying to take down Neville Gallimore. And really, that's going to be one of the big keys there up front. Now, for the OU at linebacker, I think, things have really improved now that Caleb Kelly is back, because really what you can do with that, Caleb Kelly playing inside allows Kenneth Murray to move outside. I am a firm believer that Kenneth Murray, he's one of the best athletes in this entire draft class. 6'4", 234, 240 pounds, somewhere in that range. And he flies around to the football, makes plays, has the speed to get to the perimeter. But what happens as the middle linebacker, he gets lost at times. The gap integrity, he really struggles there. He's at his best when he gets to play in space, when he's allowed to just fly around to the football, use that speed, use that playmaking ability, allow him to really just, as I said, fly around and make plays. And I think with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the running back, I thought about, well, what if he were to spy Clyde Edwards-Helaire? I don't think that's going to work. I think what he needs to be is really more of a spy on Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is a guy who loves to pull the football and run with it. If he doesn't see anything open, a lot of times the teams remain in man coverage. Secondary linebackers turn their backs to the quarterback, and he's able to take off and run for a good 10, 12, 15 yards. And those chunk plays add up quickly. So I think that might be the best case scenario for OU is to really try to put a lot of pressure on Joe Burrow. Now, again, Joe Burrow, the pocket presence, his ability to extend plays, manipulate the pocket, being able to subtly slide to avoid the rush. He'll climb in the pocket when you need him to as well. He'll get outside and on the run, keep his eyes down the field, find guys like Jamar Chase, the Biletnikoff Award winner, Justin Jefferson on the outside, Terrace Marshall, Racey McMath, and of course, Randy Moss's son, Thaddeus Moss at tight end. He's got the weapons on the outside, and that's really what makes him dangerous is, he doesn't have a huge arm, but he's very, very efficient. And it's one of those things, when Aaron Rodgers came out of school, he was one of those guys, he was so crafty in the pocket, knew how to manipulate, really navigate that pocket, slide to his left, climb up in the pocket, then slide to his right, really finding those voids in that line, being able to keep his eyes down the field and just really have that feel to really move through defenders and find his man down the field. We didn't talk about Aaron Rodgers having a huge arm either, but super efficient. I remember a game against USC, he went 25 of 25, and we're looking at Joe Burrow, 78% completion percentage on the year, very efficient, and that's really one of the things that OU is going to have to watch out for. But obviously you've got the Biletnikoff Award winner on one side, and then you've got a bona fide first-round pick and Justin Jefferson on the other. Now, Justin Jefferson, he's not the fastest guy, but he's a savvy route runner, a guy who just knows how to get open, and can be a threat down the field at times as well. But I think really your home run threat, taking the top off of a defense, is going to be Jamar Chase. He does a little bit of everything. And, he's only a sophomore, so he'll be coming back for one more year. OU secondary is really going to be challenged with having to cover all of these top-notch receivers. But then you throw in the running back. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is one of the more underrated running backs. He's only 5'9", but he's over 200 pounds, powerfully built, low center of gravity, and the jump cuts, you see him making guys miss in space, the speed to get to the perimeter. He has home run potential. Reminds you a little bit of Darren Sproles because he is such a polished receiver. Excellent hands out of the backfield. He had a game where he had 10 receptions, and he's somebody who runs excellent routes, knows understands spacing, and is able to find the voids in the zone whenever possible as well. If I'm OU, I'm looking at our nickelback. I'm looking at Buki, Brendan Radley Hiles. They call him Buki, and I expect him to be spying that running back at times. Obviously, you're going to have Kenneth Murray, likely going to be keeping an eye on that running back as well. But if you can get Buki keying in on him, then know where he is on the field at all times, because that's really what ends up happening is he's going to look like he's blocking, and then he'll release and nobody covers him. He's wide open and he's able to go ahead and get down the field. So Alex Grinch does not have, he doesn't have an easy task here. It's really a tall order right now. And really the success that his defense had against Baylor in overtime, he was putting pressure on the quarterback. And again, Joe Burrow, that's who we're talking about in the bowl game. We're not talking about a freshman kid, Zeno. You've got Joe Burrow back there. He's been unflappable. You haven't really seen him get rattled at all in the pocket. And so that's really what OU is going to have to do. Now, defensively for LSU, you've got a unique situation here with Jalen Hurts, a guy who is known more so for his running ability than his passing. And, he's getting better as a passer. I think he still needs to really be able to see the entire field. I think he doesn't always go through his progressions, locks on to his primary receiver. And if his primary receiver isn't there, it's one read and go. And he's going to pull the ball and take off. And I think, what we've seen is I think Jalen Hurts has been thinking a little bit too much. I think, when he was really at his best at the beginning of the season, he was able to pull the ball and take off and just do his thing, be Jalen Hurts. And Kennedy Brooks is healthy, so he's going to go ahead and be the starting running back. And if I'm OU, it's all about ball control. You do not want to put Joe Burrow back out on the field. So you've got to sustain drives. You got to have 10 plus play drives and get the ball to Kennedy Brooks. Only a sophomore. He'll be back for one more year there in Norman for the Sooners. But then, when Jalen gets a chance, he's got a Biletnikoff Award finalist and a top 10 pick in CeeDee Lamb. And that's really the big matchup that you want to watch here is CeeDee Lamb and Charleston Rambo, who's a redshirt sophomore receiver and a vertical threat. He's going to be the man next year, catching passes from Spencer Rattler or whoever's going to be the quarterback there at OU if they decide to bring in another transfer. But CeeDee Lamb, Charleston Rambo going up against Christian Fulton, who is a borderline first-round pick, very instinctive, and Derek Stingley, a special freshman. He's one of those guys who always seems to put himself in a position to make the play, in phase, reads the quarterback's eyes when he's in off coverage, undercuts routes, makes plays on the football. Now, these guys are susceptible to giving up big plays. They're not always going to be able to make the play on the football. But here's the thing. You have to be incredibly efficient. You have to make sure that ball is on the receiver. And the thing with Jalen Hurts is he's turned the ball over quite a bit. And a lot of those throws, if you've got CeeDee Lamb on the outside, you better make sure that you put it over his outside shoulder. Anything to the inside, and you can guarantee that Derek Stingley and Christian Fulton will be there right off the receiver's hip. You throw it inside, they become the wide receiver, and it's up to CeeDee Lamb and the other receivers to make a play on the football. That's what makes them dangerous. Here's the other thing. You've got Grant Delpit, the guy who does everything. He was slow by injury earlier, but the Thorpe Award winner is healthy now, which is scary for OU. You've got the range over the top, his ability to play in the box as well against the run. You've got to know where number 7 is on the field at all times. And so that's what makes that secondary so dangerous. Now, here's the thing. Up front, they don't have a ton of guys who are going to put pressure on the quarterback. You've got Tyler Shelvin, the big mammoth nose tackle. It's going to try to make it hard for you to run the football between the tackles. Glenn Logan and Rashard Lawrence, not the best athletes, but guys who just seem to get the job done. They're both intelligent players, and Rashard Lawrence, I think, is going to be a day 3 pick in the draft. Big number 90, keep an eye on him. I think that's going to be one of the matchups to watch. Watching Tyler Shelvin take on Creed Humphrey. Now, Creed Humphrey, he is a redshirt sophomore, and he could absolutely come back, but I think he's guaranteed to almost be a first-round pick. The former wrestler he's just a force. Ever since he came into the starting lineup there for OU as a redshirt freshman a season ago, that offense really just looked completely different with Kyler Murray at the helm. Creed Humphrey really solidified the line. They had all those veteran linemen a season ago, and now he's dealing with 4 brand new offensive linemen that are starters. And you see the leadership there in the middle of that offensive line, and I really want to see, can he move Shelvin off the ball? Can they get him moving? Is he going to be able to anchor and not allow Shelvin to really dictate that line of scrimmage? You've got Kalavon Chasen, the defensive end slash linebacker, plays well in space. He's 6'5", 240, 250 pounds. And RJ Proctor, Eric Swenson, Adrian Ely, the three tackles there for OU, they're going to have to really know where number 18 is on the field at all times. This is a guy who has explosive speed. He can bend coming off the edge. And here's one of the things that I really appreciate about him is that he's also going to get his hands into your body, and he's going to drive you back off the football. He's got a powerful punch, and that punch is going to get those offensive linemen off balance, and then he's going to drive them into the backfield, get to the quarterback, and then once he's there, he knows how to disengage. A lot of guys will struggle. They'll drive their man back, but then they can't get off the block. He's going to be able to do that, and that's one of the things that they're really going to have to watch out for. I think Jacob Phillips and Patrick Queen, the linebackers, they play well in space, and Jacoby Stevens, the safety, number 3, he's another guy that Jalen Hurts is going to have to watch out for because you're keying in on all these other guys, and Stevens has really had a huge year. He's one of those guys who can play around in the box a little bit, and then he does a really good job playing over the top, and anticipating throws. He cannot stare down his receivers. If he does that he's going to get himself into trouble. I think OU has a chance to win this game. I don't think it's a big chance, a really, it's a small chance, very small chance. But what OU has to do, they have to be incredibly efficient on offense. You have to have Jalen Hurts essentially, have the game of his life as a passer, not make any mistakes, and then ball control. Hold that ball for 10, 12, 14 play drives, keep Joe Burrow off the field, and then Alex Grinch, that defense, he really has to find ways to put pressure on Joe Burrow, and then also make sure you're keying in on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and then you have to watch out for all of those receivers. It's a tall task, and that's why I think LSU, when it's all said and done, is going to win this game. But I think OU, if they can control things a little bit, control that line of scrimmage, and sustain some drives, I think they may be in it, and it'll be a lot closer than a lot of people are thinking. The second game is really going to be an interesting one. That's Ohio State, the number 2 ranked Buckeyes, taking on the Clemson Tigers in the Fiesta Bowl. So number 2, number 3, these are honestly two of the best teams in the country. And for a while before LSU really emerged with Joe Burrow, there a lot of talk about them being the top two teams in the country. I think Dabo Swinney really feels his team was slighted. They've been the defending champions, and everyone's looking at them as kind of almost an afterthought because everyone wants to talk about what Ohio State has done with Justin Fields and Chase Young and company, and Dabo has really been doing an exceptional job with motivating his team. And ever since that near loss to North Carolina, it was that 2-point conversion that they were able to hold the Tar Heels, and since then they've been blowing out their opponents. So here are some of the matchups to really watch out for. Now, when Clemson has the football, you've got Trevor Lawrence, the super sophomore, a kid who could very well end up being the number 1 overall pick in next year's draft. Polished passer, a guy who is going to make all the throws, has a tremendous arm, can throw for both touch and can rifle the football into a tight window whenever possible at will. He's playing behind an offensive line that is a veteran line. You have 4 seniors, and then Jackson Carman, the left tackle, who is going to ultimately be a pro prospect as well. John Simpson, the left guard, is a nasty, nasty player. Just really, has that mean streak, a guy who looks to really punish you at the point of attack. He's going to be one of those guys that when Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence want to run the football, they'll run behind this guy because he is such a nasty road grader, and he's going to be going up against defensive tackles like Devon Hamilton, Robert Landers, 2 guys who could potentially end up getting drafted on day 3. But I think John Simpson, if he wants to solidify himself as a day 2 pick, he's really going to have to come up big in this game, especially with Chase Young, who's going to be coming off the edge. We'll get to Chase Young in just a second, but Sean Pollard, the center, Gage Cervenka at right guard. They have to continue to do their job along the interior, and then Tremaine Ankrum is the right guard. He's somebody who I think is probably going to kick inside the right tackle. He's going to kick inside to guard at the next level. I think he just lacks some of that length overall, but he's been model of consistency, and he's really going to have to be against Chase Young, because Chase Young is the best player in this year's draft class, and really just the best player in college football in general. Number 2, man, 6'5", 265. He wins the eye test coming off the bus, and he's better than Joey Bosa and better than Nick Bosa. Those guys, they were running the 4.7s and 4.8s, and Chase Young will probably run in the 4.5s at the combine, let's be honest. So explosive coming off the ball, gets in that sprinter stance, that 4-point stance, and just fires into the backfield, times his jumps really well. Excellent flexibility, the ankle flexion, his ability to fire off the line, beating his man off the ball oftentimes, gets low out of his stance, or stays low out of his stance, just fires off, uses his hands, has a variety of moves with his hands. He'll slap the hands down and then rip through and flatten out to the quarterback. You'll see a club and rip as well. You'll see an arm over. He'll not only attack the outside, he'll fake the outside and come inside, cross the face of the offensive tackle and shoot the gaps. Chase Young is a game wrecker, and you have to know where number 2 is on the field at all times. And the thing with Clemson is they have a veteran offensive line, and I would anticipate them looking to potentially chip and double him. They have J.C. Chalk at tight end. I would expect Chalk to ultimately end up squaring off with him as a second blocker to help out both Carmen and Ankrum, and they're really gonna have to really hold that down. So if Trevor Lawrence gets time, he's got the receivers. He's got a bevy of receivers at his disposal. None more important to him though than T. Higgins, 6'4", 210 pounds. The junior is so explosive on the outside. He to me, he's a top 4 wideout, and I think he's going to end up being a top 20 pick. And what makes him so special is he's not a burner, but I think he has deceptive speed. But it's the body control, his ability to contort his body. The catch radius is just unreal. His ability to play along the sideline, the toe tap. Really, you can put the ball along the sideline, really throw it up, out of bounds down the sideline. And this is going to be a guy who's going to somehow figure out a way to almost get horizontal with his feet in bounds to haul in the football. Makes plays after the catch. T. Higgins is going to be a lot of fun to watch. And then Justin Ross, Justin Ross, only a sophomore, but he's a dynamic receiver opposite him. So those are the 2 main targets. You'll see a lot of other receivers, DeAndre Overton to Amari Rodgers, TJ Chase. There are a lot of receivers there that you'll see, Trevor Lawrence potentially getting the ball to. But on that outside, those receivers are going to be going up against one of the better secondaries. We already talked about LSU's secondary. Well, Ohio State's secondary is pretty darn good as well. You've got Jeffrey Okudah, who is the best corner prospect to come out of Ohio State since Denzel Ward. I know that was just a couple of years ago, but it's kind of fun to say because Jeffrey Okudah, like Ward, will probably be a top 5 pick. He's 6'1", 200 pounds. He's physical, and I think what really is impressive is you watch him and he's patient. He's not going to fall for any of the moves there at the line of scrimmage. He's going to wait for that receiver to make and commit to their move, and then he's going to stay on him like glue. And I think that's one of the things that makes him so special is that he'll play in line, in phase. Does a really good job driving on the football and off coverage, reads the quarterback's eyes, and then the ball skills. He's able to high point the football, attack the football in the air, and people were worried about him in terms of really being able to make plays on the football. Didn't have an interception in his first 2 years, had 3 in 2 games. during a stretch this season. And, you've got Okudah on one side, and then you've got Damon Arnett, who came back for a senior year. Kendall Sheffield left and entered the draft. Arnett came back, and I thought it was a good decision because I thought he was exposed quite a bit as a junior. This year, on the other hand, he's been a lot more physical, getting his hands on the receiver at the line of scrimmage to jam him. He likes to also really try to reroute the receiver, especially at the top of the route, and gets really physical. And he's a guy who can come up and play the run as well. And then at the safety position, you have the veteran Jordan Fuller. I think he'll probably be an early day 3 pick. Arnett, has a chance to be a day 2 guy. He may be a 3rd rounder. I'm guessing he's probably going to end up falling to round 4. And then Sean Wade, only a redshirt sophomore. He could end up coming back, and be that next Jeffrey Okudah, Denzel Ward, and potentially be a top 10 pick. He's playing safety this year, and really you needed to figure out a way to get him and Arnett on the field at the same time. And, also Brendan White went down to injury. So he's been playing safety. He's, battled some injuries himself, but that versatility, the ball skills, the size, he's going to be one of those guys. You have to know where 24 is on the field at all times. I say that with a lot of these guys, but it's true. For Trevor Lawrence, you can't make those mistakes, especially with him patrolling that patrolling the field on the back end. He's going to make some of those reads. He's going to really attack the football like a corner, and he has the ability to come down with the football and make some plays. So I think that secondary of Ohio State's against Clemson's is really going to be a lot of fun to watch. Then you've got Travis Etienne running the football. So explosive, and just has that tremendous speed. He's one of those guys, all he needs is a crease. He's going to get skinny, get through that hole, and then once you get him into the open field, he is a burner. He can take the top off of the defense. He has that exceptional speed, but what I really appreciate this year is he's added some strength, and that's one of the things that that everyone's been talking about is the speed and the speed and the speed, but I've watched him this year run through arm tackles. I've seen him, run through contact, keep the balance. And that's, I think attributed to some added weight in the lower body. He looks a little bit thicker. And that's one of those, that was a big concern for me. I look at him as a top 4 back in the country. And so when you have him, all of that explosiveness, you're looking at some of the linebacker play there for Ohio State. And I'll tell you what, Malik Harrison, number 39, is one of those guys who he'll be a day 3 pick, but he's a guy who I think could end up starting for an NFL franchise, within the first couple of years of really arriving, because he's an intelligent player. He does a really good job diagnosing plays, not only in the passing game, in the running game, but also in the passing game. And he has pretty good speed, especially downhill. But you'll also see him get out to the perimeter and make some plays against the run as well. I think he's one of those guys who's going to have a big game and trying to corral Travis Etienne, and obviously Chase Young getting to the quarterback in the passing game, making Trevor Lawrence's life miserable. But then when Ohio State has the football, okay, so now you've got Justin Fields, number 3 in the Heisman voting, and this is a kid, 40 touchdowns and just 1 interception. What he's been able to do this year has been phenomenal in his first year after transferring from Georgia, and he's tough too. He went down to injury against Michigan and fought through the injury, and made some clutch throws to end up winning the game for the Buckeyes. And, he's got some receivers, Chris Olave and KJ Hill. Olave is only a sophomore. He's the smooth, savvy route runner and a guy who can get vertical. KJ Hill, you're going to see him run a lot more underneath routes, but, I think he can get vertical as well. You've got Benjamin Victor, who I think is probably going to be a 6th or 7th round pick. Austin Mack is another receiver who has a chance to get drafted. But, I think KJ Hill, he'll probably be an early day 3 guy, especially with the way that this draft is unfolding with this draft class. But those receivers, especially with Hill underneath and Olave going up top, they're going to go up against the likes of AJ Terrell, I think AJ Terrell against Olave would be a fun matchup to watch. AJ Terrell, very physical corner, a guy who does a really good job attacking the football when it's in the air. He doesn't see the ball thrown his way very often, and there's a reason for it. He stays low in that back pedal, does a good job driving on the football, can turn and run. Really, some loose hips there in coverage as well. He's a bigger corner. He's 6'1", only 180 pounds though, so that's one of the things that you have to watch. There aren't any big receivers there for Ohio State that could push him around, but that's one of the things to really keep an eye on. Tanner Muse, the safety. This is a guy who will come downhill. He'll hit you in the mouth. He'll play in the box, kind of a box safety. One of the things, though, that he gets exposed in is in coverage, and that's one of the things that he really struggles with. Man, when you watch that game against Virginia, Hassis Dubois never failed. He would eat up the cushion that he had there versus Muse, and would just ultimately turn Muse around. I mean, he really had a field day, really exposing the stiffness in Muse's hips. And I think that's really what I think Ohio State can take advantage of. Whoever's going to be lining up there in the slot over Muse, that's going to be who Fields ought to target whenever possible. But here's the thing. I think Clemson knows that. So you have the do everything Butkus Award winner, number 11, Isaiah Simmons. This is somebody who flies around all over the field. You have to know where number 11 is on the field at all times, which is why he's going to be a top 10 pick in my book. 6'4", 230 pounds, converted safety, but he still has, ball skills for days. This is somebody who, patrols the middle of the field and does a good job undercutting routes there, but he can also get depth. He covered who was it? It was against South Carolina, and he's covering the slot receiver, and I believe it was Shi Smith, and got vertical, and he ultimately was able to get back and elevate and knock the pass away. He had to recover because the initial speed and the initial burst, but when Hilinski cut loose with the football, Ryan Hilinski, he ultimately was able to not only make up that ground with that closing speed, but then elevate, time that jump well, elevate it, and knock the football away. Incredible range. He plays sideline to sideline against the run, can shoot into the backfield and make the quarterback's life miserable. Isaiah Simmons, that's going to be the guy really to watch there, and that's really who I think Justin Fields has to know where he is on the field at all times. All of the defensive linemen, the Cleveland Furls to the Dexter Lawrence to Christian Wilkins, Austin Bryant, they're all in the NFL now. So you've got a lot of young guys playing up front, and really the matchup that you're going to be seeing, you'll see Xavier Thomas, you'll see Tyler Davis, Niles Pinckney, Justin Foster, not really household names at this point, but guys who just play smart football. You have James Skalski and Chad Smith are the other linebackers. And so they'll be going up against an offensive line. Thayer Munford has been exposed at times with speed rushers. Brandon Bowen is more of your physical right tackle. But really what is going to happen is it's that interior of the line. The interior of the line is really, and it's the guard positions. I think Jonah Jackson, people haven't been talking about him. He transferred in, and he's a senior and a guy who I think has a chance to be a day 2 pick because of his ability to drive guys off the football, but he's also very technically sound in the passing game. And then Wyatt Davis is a special player there he's a sophomore right guard, and you keep an eye on those guys. They're pretty agile as well. They can get out in space, climb to the second level, and make some blocks. And J.K. Dobbins, the first Ohio State Buckeye to rush for over 1,000 yards in each of his 3 seasons since Archie Griffin, and he can run with power. He has deceptive speed. I think he shows off a lot more speed than people were really giving him credit for. And then he's a tremendous receiver. Another guy, coming out of the backfield. When you talk about the top receivers in this year's draft, I think obviously you've got DeAndre Swift coming out of Georgia, not a lot of miles on the legs. excellent receiver, and has some speed and some power to his game. Travis Etienne, another guy who has really improved as a receiver out of the backfield, but not known as a receiver as much. You've got Jonathan Taylor, who's improving as a receiver. He's such a dynamic running back, has more rushing yards in his first 3 seasons than anybody. Only he and Herschel Walker have done, what he's been able to accomplish there at Wisconsin. And I think he's explosive, can run with power, run with speed. To me, I still have him possibly as my number one guy, but man, J.K. Dobbins is making a big argument if he ends up coming out and entering the draft after his junior year this season. He has a chance to end up being the number one pick in terms of the running backs, which would probably put him as a mid to late first rounder. He has a chance. I really want to see what he runs in the 40, but his ability, the lateral quickness, his ability to set up his blocks, and also really set up the defenders in space and make them miss. He's another guy. All he needs is a crease, but I think the vision, his ability to see the cutback lanes, and really find daylight is what makes him special. So Ohio State and Clemson, who's going to end up winning that matchup? I think it's one of those things to where, you can never count Clemson out, but I think some of the youth on defense, Brent Venables, I think is going to have his work cut out for him, having to deal with both Fields and Dobbins. And we've seen what happens. They get down by 2 touchdowns to Wisconsin. They're able to come back and win. There's a lot of talent on that Ohio State defense. I think that at the end of the day, you're going to end up seeing Ohio State punch their ticket to the national championship to take on LSU. So I mentioned that those are just 2 of the 4 games on Saturday, December 28th. Another game is really going to be interesting. You've got the Memphis Tigers. It's a Lions and Tiger matchup. The Memphis Tigers, number 17 in the country in the Cotton Bowl against the number 10 ranked Penn State Nittany Lions. Mike Norvell's taken the job, moved on to Florida State. But Memphis, they're led by their quarterback, Brady White. He's a junior, has a decent arm, pretty mobile guy. He's got kind of a weird delivery that makes him susceptible to some passes getting batted down. And when you've got Penn State, you've got Yetur Gross-Matos, who is playing in the bowl game, by the way. And I love the fact that we have these first-round picks that are wanting to play in the bowl game and really show out well. I remember Solomon Thomas a couple of years ago playing in the bowl game against, I think it was a Sun Bowl, against North Carolina, and he was unblockable. I think that really solidified him as a top 3 pick in the draft. And so, when I look at Yetur Gross-Matos, he has a chance to have a big day against Memphis, really coming off the edge. And I think down the stretch, he's been really wreaking some havoc against the quarterback, not just in the running game, but also getting after the quarterback as well. I think Robert Windsor, he'll be going up against Justin Woodard there at the center position. And I think that's going to be a matchup to watch along the interior. Penn State, though, that their inside linebacker, only a sophomore, but Micah Parsons, he was a Butkus Award finalist, a guy just a do everything, a tremendous athlete. He'll be talked about as a potential top 10 pick in next year's draft. But those are some of the guys that Memphis really has to watch out for. The secondary is experienced, but that's really where Memphis is going to probably want to attack. They have Kenneth Gainwell, who basically picked up where Darrell Henderson left off. Fabulous freshman season, really an explosive back, one cut and go type of a runner, runs with a little bit of power as well. And but the receivers, DeMonte Coxey, only a junior, big receiver, physical receiver, can get down the field, really adept at the back shoulder throw, using his body to his advantage to really put that defender on his back hip. And then Antonio Gibson, special receiver, 6'2", 223 pounds, second year player. He's a JUCO guy. And people aren't really talking about him. And I really wonder why, because he had a game where he had a receiving touchdown, a rushing touchdown, and a return for a touchdown. And really, he has a running back's mentality when carrying the football. And when I look at him, I liken him to Laviska Shenault, about the same type of body type. And, with Laviska Shenault, he runs a lot of underneath routes. And ends up making a lot of plays after the catch, runs really physically running guys over. And that's something that you'll see from Antonio Gibson. But, Antonio also, I think in terms of the route tree, actually runs a little, some more routes than Laviska does. And he'll be somebody to really keep an eye on in this game. I think for Penn State offensively, Pat Fryermuth, the tight end, has decided he is going to come back for his junior season. He's just an awesome athlete there at the tight end position. He's a guy who can get vertically up the seam and really presents a lot of mismatches, both for the secondary and the linebackers with the size and the speed. But KJ Hamler, the receiver, I think he and Sean Clifford have really developed some chemistry there on the outside, and you want to see what they can do against Memphis's defense. I think that's where Memphis may be overmatched. KJ Hamler is going to be a slot receiver at the next level, and a guy who is very sudden in and out of his breaks. He's not only a guy who's going to get vertical on you, but you're going to see him run a lot of out routes, corner routes, posts. Really does a good job selling those routes, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a double move or two thrown in there as well. I think Penn State ends up with the victory in the Cotton Bowl, and then Notre Dame, the 15th ranked Fighting Irish, taking on Iowa State, the Cyclones, in the Camping World Bowl. And when Iowa State has the football, you're going to have Brock Purdy, the sophomore quarterback, a guy who has been pretty efficient for Matt Campbell's program. No David Montgomery at the running back position, but you have a guy by the name of Kene Nwangwu, a guy that a lot of people don't really know about, but he's a pretty darn good athlete there at the running back position. They've got a load of tight ends, including Charlie Kolar, a 6'7" sophomore tight end, and he's one of those guys I think we'll be talking about in next year's draft as well. You've got some really good linemen as well. Julian Good Jones and Bryce Meeker at the tackle position. I think Meeker's probably going to end up being a guard at the next level. And then you have Josh Kniffel as well at the left guard position. Those are going to be the three guys that you want to watch along the interior of the line. And they'll be going up against a guy by the name of Khalid Kareem, number 53, 265 pounds, I want to say. And he's one of those guys who, he uses power. He has some quickness. I think the speed to power is really what you see. You see a lot of bull rushes out of him, using more power than anything else. But he does have a little bit of speed, especially if he's able to shoot the gaps inside, get to the quarterback in a hurry. When you look at Notre Dame defensively, obviously you've got Alohi Gilman, the safety. On the back end, Troy Pride Jr. is one of those corners that nobody's really talking about, but he's a top 10 corner in my book. He's tremendous speed and a guy who just that closing speed you can't teach it. He's got pretty good ball skills as well when he arrives at the ball. Jalen Elliott is another safety to keep an eye on. Kyle Hamilton is only a freshman, but man, this guy, and he's going to be a special player. He and Jeremiah Owusu Karoma, the linebacker, he's another guy to really keep an eye out for. We won't get to see Julian Okwara. He broke I want to say it's his fibula and is out for the year, but he was their top pass rusher. Notre Dame defensively, I think it'll be interesting, against Iowa State. I think a lot of people are kind of writing Iowa State off, when you look at that matchup, just because, is Iowa State going to be able to move the football against the Irish defense? But what I will say is when you look at the Irish offensively, you've got, Tony Jones running the football for them. Ian Book, kind of an up and down season, not always the most efficient, but he gets the job done. Chase Claypool is really going to be the biggest target to keep an eye on. He's 6'4", 6'5", 220 pounds, excellent hands. Not the fastest guy, but somebody who understands, how to high point the football, uses his body to his advantage, can be a red zone option, but, he's a downfield threat, and they use him as such, for Notre Dame. Not as explosive as Miles Boykin. And he's one of those guys, he has that body type to where he could put on another 20 pounds and be a Darren Waller type tight end. That's really what I would love to see him do at the next level because of the the depth of the draft class, he'll probably be a fourth, fifth round pick. I think that's probably what makes sense. Cole Kmet, the tight end, a dynamic playmaker on the up the seam, also a decent inline blocker. He's coming back to Notre Dame, as is the left tackle Liam Eichenberg. And Eichenberg is the guy, I think he's going to benefit from having one more year. He can get stronger, especially in the lower body. I think he moves pretty well, takes really good angles, especially with his kick slide, mirrors a little bit. I'd really like to see him, put some power to his game. I think that really kind of take things to the next level for him. Iowa State, they've got a linebacker by the name of Marcel Spears, who is an athletic linebacker with absolutely exceptional range. He's 6', 216, so he's kind of undersized. Could be potentially be a day 3 pick, especially as a special teams ace. Greg Eisworth, the safety. He's an underclassman, but he could potentially declare. He's battled some injuries, but just an instinctive safety, can make plays all over the field. I think he's probably not going to be a day 2 pick if he were to come out this year. So I think it would behoove him to come back for one more season. You've got Ray Lima, the big nose tackle, takes up a lot of space. You're not, if you look at the stats, you're gonna not be very underwhelmed, but you've got to really watch the big guy in the middle, because he does a really good job opening holes for Spears, Mike Rose, and Orion Vance. Orion Vance was leading the team in sacks, and a guy that can really get after the quarterback. One of the guys that I wish I would have gotten to watch play against Liam Eichenberg was Jaquan Bailey, their top pass rusher. He's injured and not going to be playing in the game, but Jaquan Bailey, 6'2", 250 pounds, long arms for a guy who's only 6'2", and does a really good job coming off the edge. That would have been a fun matchup to watch. Now, obviously no games on Sunday, but you've got Monday, December 30th. First bowl game is Western Kentucky, Tyson Helton and the Hilltoppers taking on Western Michigan. Tim Lester and company in the First Responder Bowl. Now, Western Michigan is really going to be led by, they have their quarterback, John Wasink, but I think they're going to go as their bell cow, Levante Bellamy goes. This is a 1,000-yard rusher, a guy who runs with some speed, has a little bit of power to him as well, good balance, runs with a low pad level. And then for Western Kentucky, Tyson Helton really doing a great job in his first year, taking him to a bowl game. And, the Hilltoppers, struggled a season ago. They ended up 8-4, second in the Conference USA East. And for the Hilltoppers, the guy to really watch is number 10, D'Angelo Malone. He's 6'4", 230 pounds, the junior, led the team in tackles with 90, but also 20 and a half tackles for loss, 11 sacks, flies around to the football. I think he's probably your top pro prospect right now on defense. And then Juwan Jones, the 6'3", 270-pound sophomore defensive end. This is a guy who has 17 and a half tackles for loss and 11 sacks in his career in just 2 seasons there with the Hilltoppers. Those are going to be the guys defensively to really keep an eye on. I like Western Kentucky in this game. I think Tyson Helton really has something going there with the Hilltoppers. Mississippi State, SEC, Joe Moorhead and company taking on Louisville. Scott Satterfield, his first year there in the Music City Bowl. And for Mississippi State, you've got Kylan Hill. Now Kylan Hill, over 1,300 yards on the ground, 10 touchdowns. And he's a big physical back, and he's working his way into my top 10 of the running backs. And I'll tell you why. It's because he can run with some power, has some speed. He's not going to be that game breaker guy, but a guy who I think can definitely, he's somebody who, when you need to really sustain some drives or to run out the clock, this is a guy that you can get the ball to. He also shows pretty good hands in the passing game, but I think really what sets him apart is his ability to pass block. His ability to really see the defense, understand where the blitz is coming from, especially if you've got multiple blitzers coming from both sides. Which blitzer are you going to take? Are you going to take the guy on the outside? Are you going to take the guy on the inside? More often than not, take the guy on the outside. One of the guards should be able to take the guy there on the inside, but understanding when that needs to take place, and usually he ends up getting home and making that block to free up the quarterback, whoever it's going to be, whether it's Tommy Stevens or Schrader. That's really going to be the big question mark there for the Bulldogs. Now defensively, I'm sorry. If we stay offensively for them, you've got Darrell Williams, the center, but he's questionable with a left leg injury. Williams is probably going to be a fifth round pick. You've got Jaquarius Landrews, the strong safety, 6 foot, 200 pounds. Has 72 tackles, second leading tackler on the team, 6 pass breakups. Errol Thompson, not sure if he's going to enter the draft or not. He's only a junior, 6'4". I'm sorry, 84 tackles. Reading my notes wrong here. 84 tackles there defensively for the Bulldogs. Those are going to be some of the guys to keep an eye out for. For Louisville, Scott Satterfield, 7-5 in their first year there with the Cardinals, and Mekhi Becton, the left tackle, 6'7", 369. I think he's going to kick inside to guard. I don't think he has the foot speed at the next, to really handle things at the next level. But you look at Mekhi Becton, he's not going to play in the draft. He's already declared, and he's coming out, so he's not going to play in the bowl game. Guy to watch out for. Only a sophomore, 5'9", 153 pound, Tutu Atwell, over 1,000 yards. Let's see, 1,125 to be exact on 60 receptions with 11 touchdowns. He's one of those guys. Undersized, but a guy who is a savvy route runner, explosive speed. He's going to be a fun one to watch. And then on the interior of the defensive line, Gigi Robinson, 6'4", 295, 6 tackles for loss, 4 sacks on the year. He's one of those guys who can collapse the pocket from within. I think in this game, Mississippi State's going to end up winning it, but the way Satterfield's team's been playing, I think it might be a little bit closer than everyone expects. Now, Cal. If you remember last year, Cal against TCU, not the most stellar bowl game. It was a bit of a snore fest. So they're taking on Illinois in the Red Box Bowl. Really, the big thing here for Cal is Evan Weaver. Really for both teams. For Cal, it is Evan Weaver, 172 tackles. A guy who is just so instinctive, 11.5 tackles for loss, a couple of sacks to his credit as well, can drop into coverage. I think he's a better athlete than people give him credit for. I don't think he's going to test all that well, but it's the instincts. He puts himself in a position to make plays, flies around to the football, knows where the quarterback's going to go with the football, and the same thing, he's able to diagnose the run plays, and he's usually beating the running back to the spot. He's not running to the hole itself. He's running to where that where the running back's going to be, and does a good job wrapping up in space. But the other linebacker, if you like linebacker play, this is the game for you, because you've got Delay Harding for Illinois, 6'1", 230 pounds, 143 tackles, and 12 tackles for loss. Also, 3 interceptions, 2 of which were returned for touchdowns. He's one of those linebackers. He'll be a late day 3 guy, but I think he'll be someone who will end up not only getting drafted, but making an NFL roster. Cal also with Ashton Davis on defense. He's a safety. You look at the numbers, just 55 tackles, 2 interceptions, 4 pass breakups, but he's a sprinter on the track team, a guy who has exceptional range over the top. Keep an eye out for him. And then when Illinois has the football, you've got Reggie Corbin in the backfield, over 600 yards on the ground, but this is a guy who's a slasher, a guy who's going to make cuts, down the football field, and really without losing any speed. I think at the end of the day on this one, Cal's defense, I think it'll be just a little too much for Illinois. I know Illinois has really been turning some heads, but I think at the end of the day, Cal's going to end up getting the win. Which takes us to the Orange Bowl, Capital One Orange Bowl, number 9 Florida Gators taking on number 24 ranked Virginia Cavaliers. So let's see. we look at this game and the Virginia Cavaliers, really led by their quarterback Bryce Perkins, and I look at Bryce Perkins, and he's not a guy who's going to end up playing quarterback in the league, but I could see him potentially having a Taysom Hill type role because of his ability to make plays with his legs, and that's really what you see is that just get the ball in his hands. And he's going to make some plays. So he's one of those guys. I don't know that he'll get drafted, but he's somebody, just find ways to get the ball in his hands and allow him to do what he does. At the receiver position, you have Assis Dubois and Joe Reed. Assis Dubois is a 6'3", 210-pound receiver, and what he did against Clemson really opened my eyes and really wanted me to go back and watch some more of the game film for him. He's a big receiver, really a good route runner, and a guy who can make plays down the field. Catches the football away from his body as well, so corners won't be able to necessarily make a play on the football. And here's the thing: Florida is going to be without C.J. Henderson, who's declared for the draft and will be playing in the bowl game. C.J. Henderson going to be a top 15 pick. So you've got Marco Wilson, who's going to be the number one corner there for Florida, and I think these receivers can take advantage of some of these corners, especially guys that want to be aggressive. Assis Dubois, Joe Reed, the route running ability, you can see some double moves in their future. And when Florida is on defense, you've got Jonathan Greenard. I think Jabari Zuniga is going to be healthy. So you put the two of them coming off the edge, and Bryce Perkins ultimately using his legs to beat you. Florida offensively, you're going to have Kyle Trask throwing the football. He's got one of the better receivers, and I really would have loved to have seen Van Jefferson take on Bryce Hall. Van Jefferson is a sneaky good receiver. The route running ability, he just knows how to get open. So quick in and out of his breaks. He sets his man up really well. At the top of the route. The stem. He'll fake inside, go outside, and really create some separation late. No Bryce Hall because of the leg injury. So I think he could potentially have a big game. And I think Kyle Pitts, the tight end, that's another guy that you're really going to have to keep an eye on if you're Virginia. Charles Snowden, I think it's kind of been underwhelming this year, the 6'7" linebacker. Really want to see him step up and make some plays. And Jordan Mack, the inside backer, a guy who, has been racking up sacks this year, but, he was quiet at the last couple of games. You really want to see him step up and make some plays. Eli Hambeck is a name to watch out for. He plays along the line, and I could see him potentially being a 5 technique in a 34 defense at the next level. I think he'll be one of those guys who, could potentially get drafted, because of his ability to, he takes up space and can make some plays behind the line of scrimmage when called upon to do so. At the end of the day, though, I think Florida just a little bit too much. LaMichael Pirine is the running back there. He's a savvy back, really good in pass protection, decent hands out of the backfield as well. He's running behind an offensive line that's really young, and he just hasn't really had a chance to really get going. And I said Florida was going to win this one. I'm kind of back and forth with it. I think Virginia may have a chance to win this one. It just kind of depends on whether or not Bryce Perkins can really make some plays in space with his legs. I just think Florida, that defense there for Dan Mullen, I think they end up getting it done. I'll stay with the Gators with my initial pick here, which takes us to Tuesday, December 31st, Virginia Tech and Kentucky. Interesting matchup here in the Belk Bowl. Virginia Tech, I think when we're talking about the what is it, 27 straight bowl games, I believe, for Virginia Tech. When you look at them, I think the top pro prospect right now is probably Reggie Floyd, the safety. 6 foot, 222 pounds, very physical in the box safety. A guy who I think has pretty good range. Playing the football over the top in the passing game, but he's going to be a physical guy. He's not going to be afraid to come up and hit you. Dax Holyfield, only a sophomore, but he's a dynamic linebacker as well. A lot of fun to watch. And then for Kentucky, they have a guard by the name of Logan Stenberg, who I think is a big physical guy, a little bit of a mean streak. He'll be one of those guys to watch on the line blocking for Lynn Bowden. Lynn Bowden is declared for the draft, and he's a receiver converted to quarterback this year due to injuries. And he said, you know what, the last impression, he wants it to be a good one. And when you look at Bowden, not much of a passer, just 46% completion percentage, but over 1,400 yards on the ground. And before he converted to the quarterback position, he had 30 receptions for 348 yards and a score. He's one of those interesting athletes. And in this receiving class, you're looking for guys who can do things a little bit differently, things that other guys can't. And I think, in the last bowl that we were breaking down a little bit, Van Jefferson, with his route running ability, he's so difficult to cover because of his savviness out there. And then Lynn Bowden, with his, he's just a tremendous athlete. He'll return kicks and punts if you ask him to. He can be a quarterback, can run the football. He's a receiver. That do everything mentality, I think, could end up getting him drafted higher than some of these other receivers. So I think when it's all said and done, I'm expecting Virginia Tech to end up winning that game. If you go to the Florida State, Arizona State game in the Sun Bowl, Florida State going to be without their star running back, Cam Akers, who's decided that he's going to skip the bowl and just get ready for the draft. And, Cam Akers, I thought last year he his vision, was questionable at times, always looking to bounce it outside when he had the hole back to the inside. This year, I thought that he looked much more decisive with his running. Obviously he's always had the speed. He's always had the power. He's one of those guys who I think, can get into an NFL camp and could really surprise people and have a bigger impact than I think some people are really expecting. Marvin Wilson, potential first rounder, but probably going to end up being a second round pick. He's a first round athlete for sure, but I think he's going to be a second rounder just based on the production. A lot of his stats, if you look at the stats, they look impressive, but a lot of the stats were came in just a couple of games. He's out with a hand injury, and so he's done for the year, so he won't be out there either. So the next guy on the list would be Hamza Nasruddin, the safety. Over 100 tackles. He's 6'4", 215 pounds. He's kind of that hybrid, new age linebacker, safety, type. But he has pretty good range for a guy his size. Over 100 tackles. He's battling a leg injury though, so he's going to be questionable for the game. And I mentioned that Cam Akers is going to be out. Well, Arizona State's going to be without their top running back, Benjamin. He's declared for the draft. He's one of those guys, who makes things difficult because he's one of those. It's hard to tackle a spinning target, and he spins in and out of tackles all the time. The problem is ball security, and that's really the biggest thing he's going to have to show teams that he can hold on to the football. I think he falls into the mid to late third day because of that. And then Brandon Ayuk, the receiver, a dynamic playmaker, both as a receiver and in the return game. A guy who can take the top off of a defense. I've been saying that a lot, but when you look at some of these speedsters, you'll understand why. Ayuk has decided that he's also not going to play in the bowl game. So that's going to allow Arizona State, they'll have Jaden Daniels, their freshman quarterback. Cole Cabral, the center, is going to be a guy to watch for Arizona State on offense. Defensively, Chase Lucas, he's 5'11", 175 pounds, aggressive corner, a guy who likes to gamble and take chances. He needs to put on some weight, and hopefully he comes back for one more year. He gets pushed around a little bit. Merlin Robertson is a playmaker there at the linebacker position. I think at the end of the day with this, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Florida State is going to find a way to end up winning this football game. So let's see. After the Florida State game, we've got Navy and Kansas State. Interesting matchup in the Liberty Bowl. The 23rd ranked midshipmen, really led by their quarterback, Malcolm Perry. And when you're putting up 1,800 yards, I understand you have the triple option, but still 1,800 yards and 21 touchdowns on the year. He's a guy that you would love to have seen get some Heisman talk with it. Ken Niumatalolo's crew there running that triple option. I think Malcolm Perry. The question is he going to be a draftable player? He does a lot of things right with the ball in his hands. He's an explosive playmaker, so that's one of those things. Keep an eye on him. I think Kansas State, when you watch them play, James Gilbert, the running back, a smallish kind of a change of pace type back, transferred in from Ball State, and he's one of those guys with that low center of gravity, a guy who can be that potential scat back, if you will. I think defensively, you've got Reggie Walker, who's been on that defense for a while, Denzel Goolsby at safety, but the guy to watch is a sophomore, Wyatt Hubert. 6'3", 258 pounds, 12 and a half tackles for loss, 7 sacks. I think he's got a pretty good burst coming off the ball. He'll be coming back to Manhattan for one more year, but he's one of those guys, if I were to say, defensively, who will be the guy to watch for the draft, it would be him. I think at the end of the day here, Navy ends up coming away with the win, and I think they'll probably win going away, although Kansas State, they're a tough team. I just think Navy... I think Kansas State's going to struggle to stop Malcolm Perry. Wyoming and Georgia State in the Arizona Bowl. Now, Wyoming, the guy we're going to see here's the matchup. We talk about matchups, and the matchup is going to be Trey Barnett of Georgia State, 5'10", 185-pound senior running back, over 1,300 yards on the ground, 6 yards per carry, 12 touchdowns, has 37 receptions in his career. He'll be matched up against Logan Wilson, linebacker, 6'2", 230 pounds. And Logan Wilson does a little bit of everything. I think this is the thing that is pretty impressive about him is he just makes plays all over the field. I mean, it's incredible. 98 tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 4 interceptions, 7 pass breakups, over 400 tackles in his career, 33.5 going for loss, 7 sacks, 10 interceptions, 14 pass breakups, 5 forced fumbles. He's a guy who's going to get drafted. Probably won't be until day 3. May not time all that well, but just he's a football player, man. He knows what to where to. He's reliable in the open field, knows where to go to make plays on the football, and the ball skills are definitely evident there. I think when it's all said and done with this, Dan Ellington is a nice little quarterback there for Georgia State, but I think Wyoming, Craig Bowl and company, Cowboys get it done. Utah taking on Texas. Number 11th ranked Utes taking on Texas in the Alamo Bowl. Jalen Johnson, the cornerback, I think has good length, but is a little bit handsy. He's declared for the draft, and I don't believe he's going to be playing in the bowl game, but that's okay because Utah has a lot of guys on the defensive side of the football that are fun to watch. You've got Leki Fotu, the big defensive tackle on the interior, a guy who can collapse the pocket, a space eater type of guy, can get some quick penetration with a good burst off the football. He'll chase quarterbacks down and running backs down from behind as well. Bradley and over I think just under 30 sacks in his career coming off the edge. Big number 6, 265 pounds, decent burst, excellent hand usage, tremendous motor. He's going to be somebody who's going to be working again, Samuel Cosme, the left tackle there for Texas, who I think can potentially be a draft prospect in next year's draft, only a sophomore, and really going to be wreaking havoc there against Sam Ehlinger. I think that line, Parker Braun is a draftable guard, probably a day 3 prospect, but coming from Georgia Tech, really fundamentally sound in the running game. And you think about some of the blockers there coming from Georgia Tech. Shaq Mason is one, and he's been a starter there at the NFL level. So keep an eye on Parker Braun. And then the center, Zach Shackelford, kind of an up and down career. He's gotten beat quite often. Frankly, in a lot of games, he's going to be drawing Lecky Fotu, and then John Pennicini, another quick defensive tackle, has some power as well. Bench presses this guy, and then uses some quickness to get off blocks. I think Francis Bernard, the linebacker for Utah, plays well, especially coming downhill into the backfield, but he can drop into coverage a little bit. He's going to be somebody that Sam Ehlinger is going to have to know where he is on the football or around the football at all times. And then Julian Blackman, converted corner, playing safety. He and Terrell Burgess have tremendous range on the back end of defenses. Blackman is going to, he shows off some of those cover skills and really understands some routes. So if he's back playing the safety and not actually lined up over somebody, you're going to see him off, more often than not, try to undercut routes coming over the top and make plays on the football. I think Terrell Burgess really kind of played himself into a potential day 3 pick as well. They're going to really, make things difficult for Sam Ehlinger. And the matchup I would have loved to have seen was Colin Johnson taking on, Jalen Johnson. But Devin Duvernay is another guy who, runs a ton of underneath routes, plays in the slot, a guy who can get vertical as well. He was one of those guys who was among the FBS leaders in receptions per game. And, he was really kind of the security blanket for Sam Ehlinger throughout the season. When Utah has the football, you've got Tyler Huntley, the quarterback, Zach Moss, the running back. Huntley is dynamic as a quarterback, but really it's Zach Moss. Zach Moss is the bell cow. He's the guy that's, if Utah's going to win the game, it's going to be because of Zach Moss. He's a guy who runs with power, runs with a low pad level, runs through contact, runs over defenders, has a mean stiff arm, and then he has a good burst in space. And he doesn't look like he's moving all that fast at times, but he starts pulling away from defenders, and the jump cuts, the lateral cuts, making guys miss in the hole. That's really what makes him special. And I think Utah at the end of the day ends up winning this game against Texas. Texas. They've got Brandon Jones, the safety, in number 19. He's going to be, a guy that's going to get drafted. But I think at the end of the day, like I said, Utah's ground game is what's going to get it done. So we're through the rest of the 2019 bowl games. We're into 2020. Wednesday, January 1st, Minnesota taking on Auburn in the Outback Bowl. Number 18th ranked Gophers. Tanner Morgan there at the quarterback position. He'll be having to watch out for number 5 for Auburn. Number 12 ranked Tigers. Number 5 is Derek Brown. To me, another top 10 pick. Just so powerful with his hands at the point of attack. You see him bench pressing offensive linemen and getting into the backfield in a hurry. He shows a tremendous burst as well. He's a guy who, again, you have to know where he is on the field at all times. You're going to see him double teamed quite often. I want to see this matchup, though, because Marlon Davidson, the edge rusher, shows off some pretty decent speed. Match these guys up. Put them, and really Marlon Davidson did a tremendous job beating Alex Leatherwood, kind of exposing some of that lack of quickness. But I really want to see, you've got all this size on this line, especially at the tackle position. You've got Sam Schluter, who I think could potentially be a sneaky draft prospect in next year's draft. And then Daniel Fa'alele, the sophomore, 6'9", 400 pounds. You want to talk about a big dude. That's it right there. You've got Rodney Smith, who's a powerful back, a senior. He could potentially get drafted late on day 3. Tyler Johnson, a guy who's not very explosive, but I think he's just a savvy route runner, knows how to get open, catches the ball with his hands. He had a little bit of trouble with drops at the beginning of the season, but a guy who just, he runs the good routes, knows how to separate late. I question whether or not he's going to be able to separate at the next level, but he's still worthy of a second day pick, in my opinion. Rashad Bateman, only a sophomore. He'll be back next year, but he was one of the best. Actually, I think he was the best in terms of statistics in the Big Ten. and he'll be Tanner Morgan's go-to guy because Tanner Morgan's only a sophomore. Tanner Morgan, a quarterback, very efficient, doesn't make a lot of mistakes, not going to wow you physically, but a guy who's not going to make a ton of mistakes. I think Auburn, when you look at them and you're talking about them offensively, you've got Prince Tega Winogo, still raw, doesn't, technique is really what his issue is. He's a tremendous athlete there at the left tackle position. He's going to get matched up against Carter Coughlin, a guy who, is a sack artist. He's somebody who plays with some speed coming off the edge, but I do worry about Coughlin, at the next level. I don't know that he has the size necessary to play 43 defensive end, and I don't know if he has the twitchiness and the flexibility to play in space as a 34 outside linebacker. Jack Driscoll on the right side, he's another tremendous blocker, somebody who I think is going to get drafted higher than people expect. Because everyone talks about Winogo as an athlete, but I think Driscoll is more fundamentally sound. Probably has the lower ceiling of the two, but has the higher floor. Kamal Martin, the linebacker for Minnesota, has pretty good range. A guy who can play both against the pass and the run. And then Antoine Winfield Jr., he's going to be the guy that Bo Nix, the quarterback for Auburn, has to know where he is on the field at all times. He's the guy who is going to play in the box. He can play over the top. He can play in coverage. He can do a little bit of everything. I'd argue that he could potentially be a first-round pick if he decides to come out and enter the draft. He's battled some injuries, so those injury concerns could potentially drive him down in the draft, but definitely the guy to watch for Minnesota. Auburn, when Bo Nix is throwing the football, he's going to find the bigger receiver, Seth Williams, whenever possible. I think Auburn ends up winning this game, but it's going to be a lot closer than people really think. Michigan taking on Alabama. Bama not in the CFP, taking on the Wolverines. Number 14th ranked Michigan, number 13th ranked Alabama in the Citrus Bowl. Let's see. Shea Patterson, final year there at Michigan, and he's going to go up against the vaunted Alabama defense. Going to be without Terrell Lewis and Trevin Diggs, so I think are getting ready for the draft. John Runyon and Ben Bredesen. I think what they did against Ohio State and Chase Young, I thought was really impressive. You saw the athleticism there. Really, I was impressed. I thought the technique, I think that's what's going to make this interesting. I would have loved to have seen John Runyon go up against Terrell Lewis, but we are going to see him go up against Raekwon Davis, who I think has the potential to be a first rounder. 6'7", 316 pounds. I thought he's really, after a down year last year, really put things together and has been kind of the leader of that defense up front. In the secondary, they've got Xavier McKinney, and that's the guy that Patterson is going to have to keep an eye out for. But Alabama has shown that they are susceptible to getting beat over the top. And you have Donovan Peoples-Jones, you have Ronnie Bell in the slot, you have Nico Collins, the big receiver, and those are going to be guys I would have loved to have seen Collins and Peoples-Jones go against Trevin Diggs, who's has a chance to be a first round cornerback, but we're not going to see that happen. I think Michigan has a chance to put up some points against Bama's defense. And then Bama offensively, obviously you have that big line. You've got Alex Leatherwood and Jedrick Wills at the tackle positions. They'll be going up against, I think one of the more underrated sophomore defensive ends in Aiden Hutchinson, big 97, does a good job getting off blocks, bench pressing his man, pretty good athleticism, bends well for a guy his size. And then Kwity Paye, 270-pound junior, he could potentially enter the draft, and he's one of those guys who I think makes some plays behind the line of scrimmage. When I look at them, in the linebacker position, Josh Uche is probably their best pass rusher. He's declared for the draft. Cameron McGrone, he's an underclassman, a guy who makes plays at the inside linebacker position, taking over for Devin Bush. Don Brown, I really want to see what he's going to come up with, how he's going to potentially stop all four of those receivers there at Bama. I mean, you've got Jerry Jeudy who does everything, both the route running ability and the speed vertically. Henry Ruggs is going to be the speed demon in this year's draft, probably be one of the fastest receivers, if not the fastest receiver. And then you've got Devontae Smith, who's a savvy route runner, not the fastest guy in the bunch, but a guy who just knows how to make plays. And then, the scary proposition is Jalen Waddle could potentially be the first receiver taken in next year's draft. Jerry Jeudy going to be a top 5 pick more than likely, possibly may fall out of the top 10, depending or top 5, depending on who ultimately ends up getting those selections. But there's just too much firepower there, I think, for Michigan to really have to deal with. I've got a lot of young guys in the secondary. Lavert Hill is really going to be asked to have a big game, number 24. But I think at the end of the day, Bama, with that passing attack, and then you ask Najee Harris to run the football. I think Najee Harris is probably going to have a rough go of it, though. You've got Khaleke Hudson and Jordan Glasgow at the inside backer positions, and then Carlo Kemp at nose tackle, along with those defensive ends. Josh Metellus coming up as a safety. I think he won't rush for 100 yards, I don't think, against Don Brown's defense, but I still think Alabama ends up winning that game. Oregon taking on Wisconsin in the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl. Number 6 Ducks taking on the number 8th ranked Wisconsin Badgers. Justin Herbert versus Jonathan Taylor. I mean, that's really what you're dealing with here. Justin Herbert, I think he's a better athlete than Josh Allen. Has a tremendous arm strength. They've got the line, Penei Sewell, who I think will be in the running for the top overall pick in next year's draft. So fluid as an athlete. It's amazing how well he moves for a guy his size, 6'5", 322 pounds. And, if you were to watch him play out there at left tackle, number 58, man, tremendous handwork. He's so agile, so light on his feet, moves like a tight end, but he also plays with power. You've got Shane Lemieux at left guard, who I swear, he's played in 60 games just about. But he's a savvy guard. You've got Jake Hansen, who is an underrated center, a guy who can play with both power and also has the ability to get out to the second level. And I think Calvin Throckmorton is your technician at the right tackle. He's going to be a right tackle in the league, but I think he'll be a day 2 pick and a guy who's going to start early. Let's see. Wisconsin defensively, they're going to go up against Zach Bond, who I think is their top draft prospect there at the linebacker position. Number 56, a guy who has, he's a twitchy player, a guy who can bend coming off the edge, gets to the quarterback, can drop a little bit. But I think what they're going to really ask him to do is put pressure on Justin Herbert, get him off his mark. And then Wisconsin, they've got Quintez Cephas, the receiver. He's really the big threat down the field for Jack Cohn. Running the football, you have Jonathan Taylor, back-to-back Doak Walker Award winner, and was number 5, the 5th in the Heisman voting. And he runs with power. You absolutely see that. Runs with low pad level, runs through contact, runs over guys. Tremendous stiff arm, but he also has 10-4 100-meter speed. A guy who, when he gets into the open field, he's going to run by you. Decent lateral agility as well, and he's showed improved hands. You put him in there against Oregon's defense. They have a lot of athletes. Kayvon Thibodeau is going to be a guy to keep an eye out for. I think Oregon ends up winning this game, but Wisconsin, if they can sustain, if they get out to a lead like they did against against Ohio State. Here's the thing with Oregon is, they almost came back and beat Arizona State after getting down as well. So I think Oregon, even if they get down by a couple of scores early on, I think they have the firepower to come back and win. Sugar Bowl, Georgia, Baylor. Number 5 ranked Georgia Bulldogs, number 7 ranked Baylor Bears. Here's the thing with this one. Jake Fromm, you see both of his tackles have entered the draft and aren't going to be playing in the bowl game. And if I'm Andrew Thomas is not playing in the bowl game. I don't know if Isaiah Wilson, the right tackle, is declared or not, or has decided whether or not he's going to play in the bowl game or not. But you've got DeAndre Swift at the running back position. But Jake Fromm, he's going to be seeing a lot of James Lynch, in my opinion. And I think if James Lynch has a big game, he could potentially end up coming out and entering the draft, especially if he can potentially get a first round grade. James Lynch is one of my favorite players to watch. He's got a tremendous motor, but for a guy who is 6'4" and 290 pounds, he bends very well coming off the edge. I think he can play in a 34 defense. He could potentially play in a 4-3. When I watch him play, it reminds me a little bit of J.J. Watt. Because of the physicality with which he plays, but also the tremendous burst. He's a guy who's just always in opposing backfields. And then you've got Bravion Roy, the nose tackle nobody's talking about, 6'1", 333 pounds. They have a package defensively where all the defensive linemen are stand up, are standing up, and they rush the passer. And when he does that, he moves so well for a guy his size. He's shooting gaps. He's making plays behind the line of scrimmage. And at the point of attack, he can bench press his man and get off blocks. I think Baylor ends up winning this game, because of that. Baylor offensively, is Charlie Brewer going to be the quarterback? If he is, then I think Baylor's going to be absolutely in this game from an offensive standpoint. You've got Denzel Mims, the receiver on the outside, tremendous ball skills. He'll end up being probably an early day 3 pick, probably 4th round range. Georgia has a lot of talent defensively, but I think Baylor ends up getting it done because of their defense. January 2nd, BC taking on the number 21 ranked Cincinnati Bearcats in the Birmingham Bowl. BC going to be without A.J. Dillon, their dynamic back, 6 foot, 250 pounds. He lacks a burst, which is going to limit his draft potential, but he's a guy who's going to run you over. David Bailey is a sophomore, 240-pound back himself, over 800 yards on the ground. But BC, I think, is going to get outmatched and outclassed by Cincinnati. Desmond Ridder is the quarterback. He's a guy that to get to know for next year's draft. Michael Warren could potentially come out after this year. He runs like a truck. I think that's what his nickname is truck. And he's a guy who's going to hit you between the tackles, has a decent burst, tremendous hands. Defensively, they've got Brian Wright, a guy who can make some plays in space, and Kobe Bryant. It's spelled Coby, but he was named after the basketball player. He's probably their best corner man. And then Derek Forrest, the safety, another guy to keep an eye out for. I think Cincinnati wins that one going away for Luke Fickell. Gator Bowl, you've got Tennessee taking on Indiana. Tennessee, Trey Smith is probably their best draft prospect. A guy who battled blood clots and was a tackle, but I thought he was playing out of position. They moved him inside to guard, and he's been dominant at the point of attack. Very physical, but you can see some of the tackle skills on the interior of the line because he is pretty light on his feet. And I think that's really where he belongs, is at guard. Could potentially end up being one of the top 2 or 3 guards in this draft. They have Darrell Taylor, the sack artist, coming off the edge. I think he'll end up being a 34 outside linebacker at the next level. Nigel Warrior, the safety, shows some pretty good ball skills, so he's another guy to watch. For Indiana, they've got Stevie Scott, their running back, big physical runner, 230 pounds, and a punishing running back. Only a sophomore, so he'll be a guy to keep an eye out for next year's draft potentially. But the senior wide receiver, Nick Westbrook, is a guy who I think they need to get him the football. Want to see what he can do out there on the edge. But I think Tennessee's got the momentum. I think Jeremy Pruitt has something going with this team. I think the Vols surprise people and end up winning that game. January 3rd, you've got Ohio, you've got Nevada in the Idaho Potato Bowl. For Nevada, the best draft eligible prospect was Daniel Brown, 5'11", 180 pounds, and 16 pass breakups in his career. And he's suspended following the brawl that took place at the end of the UNLV Nevada game, so we won't get to see him play. Really wanted to see what he could do against Nathan Rourke, the quarterback. He's a 62% passer, But when you look at him, over 2,600 yards, 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. But this is a guy. He ran for 780 yards and 12 touchdowns on the ground, 2,600 yards in his career and 48 touchdowns. Tremendous athlete. Not really going to be a pro prospect from a quarterback position. But when you look at some of these athletes, you talk about the guy at the Taysom Hills of and such. And Nathan Rourke is one of those athletes that a team could look at and potentially put a packet, design a package around him, or potentially if he wants to play, one of those hybrid positions, there may be a home for him at the next level. Javon Hagan is the safety. I think he's probably Ohio's best draft eligible prospect. 6 foot, 215 pounds, over 300 tackles in his career, 9 tackles for loss, has 6 interceptions, 18 pass breakups. So he has excellent range. He has good ball skills. I think Ohio ends up winning. Jay Norvell has 7 wins there for the Wolfpack, back-to-back bowl appearances, but I think Frank Solich's group ends up winning that game. Saturday, January 4th. Southern Miss taking on Tulane. I think for Southern, this is the battle of a couple of skill position players, in my opinion, in terms of the draft. Quez Watkins, 6'2", 190-pound receiver, another 1,000-yard year for him, following a season. I'm sorry, it's his first 1,000-yard season, but a season ago, 72 receptions, 889 yards, 9 touchdowns, over 18 yards per reception this year. For Quez Watkins. And then for Tulane, Darius Bradwell, the big physical bruising back, 6'1", 230 pounds. Only played in 9 games this year, battled some injuries, just under 450 yards. But last year, over 1,100 yards and 11 touchdowns. I think this is going to be an interesting matchup. And Willie Fritz, I like what he's got going on there with the Green Wave. I think they beat Southern Miss there in the Armed Forces Bowl. And then finally, Monday, January 6th, Louisiana taking on Miami of Ohio in the Lending Tree Bowl. And, Louisiana, when you look at them, you've got the 3-headed monster running back. Elijah Mitchell is the guy who I think can be a downhill runner. He can has some shiftiness to him as well. He's their 1,000-yard rusher. Raymond Calais is the only senior in the group. He's the more of the scat back. He's 5'9". He's a little guy, a guy who's going to be that shifty guy in space. And then Trey Regis is your downhill one cut and go, a guy who's going to look to lower his pad level whenever possible. And for Miami of Ohio, my guy there in the middle, number 58 is Doug Costin, 6'2", 295 pounds, 12 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. A guy who just does a really good job bench pressing guys, throwing guys around on the interior of the line, knows how to stack and shed, and has a relentless motor. And then I've talked about him a couple of times in podcasts, but one guy I haven't talked about at all is Sterling Weatherford. 6'4", 218 pounds, the safety, 93 tackles this year, 10 pass breakups. He's only a sophomore, so he'll be back. But, in terms of the safety position, that's really, Miami of Ohio's best weapon there. I think at the end of the day, Doug Costin, I think, will make some plays against that trio of running backs, but I think the Raging Cajuns end up getting the job done. Now, finally, the College Football National Championship game on Monday, January 13th. I said it was going to be LSU against Ohio State. I think this is going to be the matchup everybody wants to see. Chase Young and company, can they put pressure on Joe Burrow and really get him off the mark? I just don't see Joe Burrow. I haven't seen him flustered. I haven't seen him really under duress. Because of his pocket presence, his ability to, escape pressure, keep his eyes down the field, and still find the open receiver. There was a play in the SEC championship. He went through his reads, looked left, looked back to the right, and then picked up Clyde Edwards-Helaire coming across the middle of the field, able to get the ball to him and allow him to go down the field and make a play after the catch. I think LSU, with all of their playmakers there on the back end of the defense, I think that's something that you're going to see. It's going to make things difficult for Justin Fields to complete the football down the football field. And Joe Burrow, well, Justin Fields, going up against Derek Stingley, Christian Fulton, Grant Delpit, that's going to make things difficult. I think J.K. Dobbins is going to be asked to do a lot more with that running game. And I think, LSU ends up loading the box and really forcing Justin Fields to beat them with his arm and relying on some of those talented defensive backs on the back end to really do the job against Olave and Hill and company. And then when LSU has the football, I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to be the difference. I think that's really going to be the key, because you'll have Jeffrey Okudah and Damon Arnett and Sean Wade matching up against Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Terrace Marshall, and I think that's probably the best matchup that we're going to see against LSU's wide receiver trio. But I think at the end of the day, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's gonna rush for close to 100 yards. He'll probably end up with 6, 7, 8 receptions and go for close to 100 yards. I think LSU at the end of the day is going to be your national champion. So we'll see how things go after all the bowl season is over. We'll talk about the bowls. We'll talk about what we saw and really how that impacts the draft. And we'll also be talking about all of the underclassmen who have declared. We'll have a podcast dedicated to going through every single underclassman who declared and really break down what that means heading into the pre-draft process. So that's it. We have made it through the entire bowl season. Took two episodes, but we made it through. I hope everyone enjoys the bowl season. Happy holidays, everyone. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and we will talk again after the new year once bowl season is over. Again, talk bowls, we'll talk underclassmen, and we'll get right into the pre-draft process. So again, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the holiday season, and we'll do this again in 2020. So for ReadyForTheDraft.com, this has been the Ready for the Draft podcast, postseason bowl edition. I'm Gregg Schutze. Take care, everyone, and I am out of here.